So I wanted to go over the potential playoff clinching scenarios going into Week 18, and then also the current seeding and what I think the seeding is going to end up looking like. So there's a spot open in the AFC, and then there was one spot open left in the NFC. Everyone else has clinched, and just some of the seeding might change. So with the AFC, the Chiefs they've locked up the number 1 seed, and the Bills have locked up the number 2 seed. And I believe the Texans are locked in as the 4th seed. I don't think that can change. But the Ravens and the Steelers, that could switch. The Ravens are currently the 3rd seed, and the Steelers are the 5th seed. But that could switch depending upon Week 18. Now, the Ravens control their destiny. So if the Ravens win, they get the AFC North title, and they will clinch the 3 seed. And then I believe the Steelers and the Chargers could still flip-flop. So the Steelers could end up as the 6th seed if the Steelers lose and the Chargers win, it looks like. Don't know if I'm wrong on that, but the Steelers potentially could end up as like 3 different seeds. And then currently the 7th seed in the AFC is still open. The Broncos are currently in that spot right now, but they have not clinched. They lost the last 2 games, so it is going to come down to the final week of the season. So the only other teams that are available or not eliminated are the Dolphins and the Bengals that could wind up getting that 7th seed. The Broncos control their own destiny, so they just have to win, and they're in. And they're playing the Chiefs, so the Chiefs may be resting their starters. It kind of just depends. So the Broncos obviously have everything to play for. The Dolphins need the Broncos to lose, and the Dolphins need to win. And I don't think it matters what the Bengals do because the Dolphins have the tiebreaker. And the Bengals have the hardest path. The Bengals have to win. They have to have the Dolphins and the Broncos lose, and the Bengals will get in. So that is the potential scenarios for the AFC. And then in the NFC, the Vikings are currently the number 1 seed, but that's because Detroit has not played tonight. If Detroit plays and wins, they will currently be the 1 seed, but that doesn't really matter because it's going to come down to next weekend anyway for the number 1 seed and the NFC North, and then that loser will go to the 5th seed. So Eagles are locked in as a 2 seed, I believe. I don't think they can change. The Rams clinched last night with a Commanders win, so they have the NFC West title locked up, and they are currently the 3rd seed, but that could switch to the 4th seed depending upon how this final week goes. And then, like I said, the Lions are currently in the 5th seed because they haven't played yet. They played tonight versus San Francisco. The Commanders winning versus the Falcons actually moved them up to the 6th seed and dropped Green Bay to the 7th seed. So that is going to be interesting to see what happens there because the Commanders control their destiny on that. So if the Commanders win, they lock up the 6th seed. It doesn't matter what happens to the Packers. So the Packers have to have the Commanders lose and win. The Packers have to have the Commanders lose and the Packers win to get the 6th seed. So I think the Commanders will probably lock up that 6th spot. And then the only other playoff spot that's open is the 4th seed right now, and that's the NFC South. It's going to come down to the Buccaneers and the Falcons. Those are the only 2 teams that are left. The Seahawks were eliminated last night. It is going to come down to this final week. The Buccaneers, they also control their destiny. They win, they're in. The Falcons have to win and have the Buccaneers lose. I'm not sure how all that tie stuff works. I don't usually get into like, if this team ties and this team ties. It's just there hasn't been a tie yet this year, and I think ties are stupid, so I'm not going to get into all of that stuff. But that is currently what it looks like. Again, just the 7th seed in the AFC is still open, and then the NFC South, which would currently be the 4th seed, but depending upon how next week goes. So those are the only playoff spots that are open. So I usually use the ESPN playoff predictor, and I go through and you can just click on the teams you think are going to win, and it just fills it in for you, which is a lot easier than having to go through and figure out clinching scenarios. This thing obviously has it all in there. So I went through and I filled out the remaining games in Week 18. I also gave the Lions a win tonight because I don't think the 49ers are going to beat them. So I think that this is how the seeding is going to finish. So obviously Kansas City has the 1 seed, Buffalo the 2 seed, and then I have Baltimore clinching the AFC North, getting the 3rd seed, Houston as the 4th seed, the Chargers at the 5th seed, Steelers at the 6th seed, and the Broncos beat the Chiefs and get in as the 7th seed. And then in the NFC, I have the Vikings beating the Lions on Sunday Night Football and clinching the number 1 seed. Then I have Philly 2, the Rams at 3, the Buccaneers at 4, Detroit at 5, Washington at 6, and Green Bay at 7. So that means that in the first round, the Chiefs and the Vikings would get the bye. And then in the AFC, you would have Denver going to Buffalo. You would have an AFC North showdown in the wild card weekend between the Steelers and the Ravens. The Steelers would travel to Baltimore. And then I have the Chargers going to Houston. And then in the NFC, the Packers traveling to Philly, the Commanders going to LA, and then Detroit going to Tampa Bay. And that is how I have that playing out. And obviously this could be different, but this is how I think this is going to wind up shaping up. The only potential thing that I think could switch is if the Lions beat the Vikings. I think everything else is going to fall into place. But I do have the Vikings beating the Lions and Detroit falling to the 5th seed. So, me being a Packers fan and being crazy optimistic sometimes, this is where I think the Packers start their journey of destiny, and they avenge all of their losses on the season, because I have them beating the Bears next week, and so they'll finish 12-5, and those 5 losses, 2 will be to the Vikings, 2 to the Lions, and then obviously 1 to the Eagles in week 1. So, it would start in Philly in Wild Card Weekend. And I think the Packers hopefully beat the Eagles, and then they would go on, if they do beat the Eagles, they would go on to play, as I have it, the Vikings as the 1st seed, and then they go into Minnesota and they beat the Vikings as the 7th seed, and then let's hope Detroit at that point wins their couple games, and then the Packers beat Detroit in the NFC Championship game to go to the Super Bowl, and it would be destiny to avenge all 3 of the teams that have beat them in order on the road and go to the Super Bowl and win. Is it crazy? Maybe, but I like it. It's a perfect storyline. So I think I'm excited to see how these playoffs turn out, and some teams that I think could make noise, and I'm excited to see, honestly, what the Commanders can do too. So